Okay, so now that you've had some space and time to reflect and have snacks, do you have questions or comments before I tell you anything new? Yes?
The last meditation we did, is that considered like something preliminary, tantric, because it has a tactile experience?
Yes, ma'am. Well spotted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. So it's interesting in our tradition. We're the Gelugpa tradition, but we're a specific kind of branch of the Gelugpa tradition involved with Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe. And Lama Yeshe really taught quite advanced things to beginners because the beginners he was teaching were modern people with an education who could kind of dive in. And so this 9-round breathing actually wasn't normally taught to beginners, but he kind of started this tradition of, just let them try it. They're fine. So it is, has aspects of Tantra in it, and it will help you if you ever go to the Tantric direction for sure. But even if you never do, it's useful by itself. Yeah. Other questions or comments? No, you ready for new things?
Yeah. Also, I wanted to say that it was good for me.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
It was good for me.
It's a nice one. Sometimes I forget to do it because it seems so simple, but it actually is so helpful when I remember, right? That's also the thing with knowing many techniques is sometimes you can get overwhelmed with options. And it's like, really, anything's going to help, just start. Yeah, it'll be clumsy and imperfect and inelegant and not perfectly tidy, and that doesn't matter, just start, just try. Yeah, and it will make your doubts and your questions much more clear if you just try by yourself sometimes. New things. Here's what happens when you start to meditate, okay, is that you realize you have a series of obstacles, yeah? But the good news is there are a series of antidotes, okay? So in a way this is quite empowering because this is a traditional list from way back when, which shows that human beings have always had trouble sitting still and focusing. People have always had trouble sitting still and focusing, so much so that lists were developed. Okay, so in a way this should make you happy, not sad, right? Not like, oh no, I'm a hopeless case. You say, no, like everyone else, okay? So this is what happens, all right, is that you think, I'm going to meditate, and then you think, or not, right? Right? So this is the first stage, right, which is laziness. And laziness comes from forgetting how great it is, right? And so laziness in the Buddhist tradition is not seen as such a character flaw. It's seen as a normal reaction that everyone has. And there's many types of busyness, or many types of laziness, I should say. One of them is being busy with other things, right? So you might not look at all lazy because you're so busy, but you're busy as a way of avoiding looking at yourself. So that's one of the types of laziness that we actively are trying to name and confront and see in ourselves because no one wants to think that they're lazy. And so sometimes we do this glorification of busyness, right? Yeah, I would do that, but I'm so busy. Oh, I'm so busy, right? Yeah. Or you find you have space and time in your schedule and then you somehow feel guilty and fill it up. Right? Oh no, I've got space. Oh no, I could go for a walk. I can't go for a walk. That's what lazy people do. I should do something, right? So our culture makes it very hard for us to settle down because we almost feel guilty about settling down and just sitting quietly and looking at stuff. We somehow feel like that is something a bad person does, Shouldn't you be more active? So we have to identify the different types of laziness that occur to us because they really do stand in the way of our spiritual development or our internal development. So one is this laziness of busyness, or getting busy with activities that are positive, are good, but they're the lesser form than what we could do, right? So this happens like, for example, you say to yourself, I'm going to meditate, but then you think, but I really have to empty the dishwasher now, right? You do have to empty the dishwasher. It needs to be emptied. You know, that's a thing. That's a true thing. But do you have to do it now? Right? Like, you know, so you think, okay, I'm going to meditate, but I'm going to walk the dog. Now, normally you do it at 6, but you've decided 5 is really important today, right? You know, so it's not like you're doing something bad instead. You're doing something good, something necessary, but you're doing it instead of. Instead of. And there's a lot of reasons why we do something lesser good instead of something greater good. And some of that is that the greater good things are hard and confronting. And it takes a while to love that about it, right? It takes a while to love that. When you do love it, everything's easy, right? But it's going to take us a while to be so thoroughly convinced that every moment of self-reflection and self-honesty is great. Right? For now, self-honesty and self-reflection is sometimes quite interesting and sometimes painful, right? Because we don't have enough compassion for ourselves, we don't have enough distance between what we think and what that means. You know, there's a lot of reasons, right? So at first, just kind of like own your laziness, like notice it, yeah? Because if you never acknowledge it, you will never move past that stage. Yeah, so we really have to look at it. There's another type of laziness, which is what we would call in modern society depression. Okay, and that sounds horrible, right? To call depressed people lazy, that's a horrible thing to say, right? That's terrible. But what we're really saying is you're looking down on yourself when actually there's nothing wrong with you, right? So you're saying only special people meditate. Right? Only special people develop themselves. I am not a special person, therefore I obviously can't do these things. That type of depression, that type of laziness, right? So it's a type of despair or a type of sadness or a type of looking down on yourself that is based on something not true, right? From a Buddhist perspective, you have the perfect seed of Buddhahood already within you. You are fine, right? Like, if we believe tiny insects and cockroaches will become enlightened someday, why not you, right? You can actually talk, right? So, you know, so this looking down on yourself is a way of stopping progress. We see this as a little bit of a type of laziness because actually your potential is perfection. So why are you looking down on yourself? Yeah? You're looking down on yourself because you're overly identified with your afflictions, which are temporary, which are removable, which are not you, right? You've decided that this is you, when in fact this is closer to you. Yeah. So this laziness of despondency is a very tricky one for us because it kind of feels like we're having humility or something. You say, oh no, that's for special people, I'm just, you know, it's like, no, everybody has the potential to become a Buddha, everybody. Yeah, why not you? Why are you so special that you can't be a Buddha, but the cockroach can? Yeah, you can actually read, you know? So it's a tricky thing to play with, this concept of a laziness that looks down on yourself. But it's an interesting one to sit with. What's preventing your progress in this moment? Is it being attached to lesser forms of happiness? Is it being attached to entertainment? Is it procrastination? Or is it looking down on yourself? You know, because these are all kind of, you know, they stand in the way of what we could be doing with ourselves. So the first step, I think, in moving through laziness is you notice it, but with a gentleness. Because if you notice it with a harshness and with a harsh gaze, you will trigger an inner rebellion. Yeah? Yeah, you'll start developing some sort of tight mind that says, do it, do it, do it, right? And as soon as you do that to yourself, you will want to rebel, even though you were the one that did it, right? It's like you have a little army sergeant in you saying, good people do this, good people do this. And so you're like, okay, I'll try. And then eventually you're so mad at that angry voice, you say, to hell with it, I'm drinking all of the alcohol in the house, right? You know, so you're worse than when you started because of how much pressure you put on yourself. So we have to be so careful about our approach to, quote, faults, because if we do it with a punishing mind or with a judging mind, it will do the opposite of what it's intended to do, right? So it always must be remembered in Buddhism that when we acknowledge and observe faults, we don't identify with them, right? We don't think they're us. They're habits that arrived here through many causes and conditions that made sense at the time. So you never think, I have this, therefore I'm bad. You think, I have this and it's not useful anymore. Made sense at the time, I can let it go now. It's just a habit. It's just a habit. It's not me. So just always keep that in the back of your mind so you don't get that kind of punishing, tight attitude about it when you notice what your blocks are. So laziness is the first one, and it gets 4 antidotes all to itself. And once you kind of get past that, you only need 1 each, right? So it shows that it's the beginning that's the hardest. Starting is the hardest. Once you've started and you've got some momentum, groovy, where did that come from? Oh. Mindfulness bell. Okay, so once you've gotten past this step, right?
Experience here.
Yeah, it's great. It takes less effort once you've gotten the momentum going, right? So know that the fact that it's hard right now is totally normal and totally expected, okay? Oh, air conditioning. Okay, so how do you get rid of laziness? Oh, sure, yeah, sure.
Interrupting.
Yeah, go for it.
Before we leave the laziness area. Depressed people do have this narrative that is self-derogating.
Yeah.
Depressed people also have a narrative that is as strong, which says, what's the use?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a different kind. Yeah, that's a different
And
kind.
I didn't hear the what's the use question
Yeah.
Related to laziness, so I
Yeah.
wanted to know.
Whole different kind. Yeah, a whole different kind. The apathy, yeah, we call apathy, what's the use, what's the point, that one. That one is, it's a type of disillusionment that doesn't have hope, right? And so the antidote to that, from the Buddhist perspective, is meditating on your perfect human rebirth, showing that you actually are in the perfect position for progress because you've suffered. Yeah? But you haven't suffered so much that you're prevented from progress. Right? So that meditation is the way of unlocking that type of apathy, depression. So you go, oh, thank goodness I've suffered so horribly because now at least I want to look at it. Now at least I have a connection with the suffering of the world. Now at least I have some investigation and curiosity about how does this happen? How can we solve it? But you're not so destitute that you can't do anything about it. So that meditation. And in no way am I minimizing people's suffering, right? It's really acknowledging that certain states of mind make it worse. Yeah, that we have our suffering. It's the ripening result of previous karma from a Buddhist perspective. But then we make it worse with all this wrong food, And so we could get rid of some of that food, and in so doing, let it run its course. Yeah. But it's a process.
But what's the use could be also driven by not having enough faith, or not being convinced that it
Exactly.
is of our own benefit.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why faith is an interesting discussion in Buddhism, because it's not ever blind faith. We say blind faith is lazy faith, right? Thinking, just believe it, just believe it, just believe it. No, that's lazy, right? Dig in. Blind faith can help you get a lot done, right? And it can be nice. But if you've ever had a huge crisis in your life, blind faith is often not enough to carry you through. People often lose their faith if it's only been blind faith when crisis comes. So the faith we're talking about is conviction based in logic. Conviction based in logic, conviction based in experience, conviction based in trial and error. So the concept of meditation is something that you have to think about and process logically before you're really convinced it's time to try. Yeah, you have to think about it a lot before you want to actually give it a go. You could just experiment, let's see what happens. But the experimenting, see what happens, is based on some faith that it's a process that seems to work. And so how do you develop that kind of faith, that kind of conviction? It might start out as, I know some people who meditate and they seem happy. Yeah? Or I've seen a YouTube video of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he seems super happy. Okay? So I want what he's having, right? And so it can start there as that process leads to that, therefore let's try, right? And that's enough to start with sometimes. Or it's an idea that the mind is trainable. And already, even before any kind of Buddhism, that you've been able to change some habits like quitting smoking, like some new dietary thing, some new exercise regime. You've been able to change some bad habits before. So I hear that this Buddhist stuff has ways to do it even more so. All right, it makes sense that it's possible because I've already done something similar, right? So it's a logic-based thing, right? It's an experience-based thing, yeah? And so you have enough of this kind of faith of conviction to want to try, and that's aspiration. So it has to start here with seems reasonable enough to move to the next step. And if it doesn't seem reasonable enough, that just means more study is necessary, not forcing, right? Just obviously I need to think about it more because I'm not convinced. But I'd like to be convinced, so I need to think about it more. Yeah? And so when you think about it enough, naturally arises the aspiration to do it, which is still not even doing it, right? And I mean, probably we've lived here for a long time in this, I would really like to learn how to do this stage, yeah? Or we revisit that stage, right?
And I think when questions come, because usually when you start, questions come, really, and you should answer them yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Not only searching, sometimes you can search them outside, but you should search them, then the understanding becomes deeper.
Yeah, exactly.
But conviction and the aspiration is not enough to keep going, especially for those who look at meditation and don't succeed, so they down
Yeah.
even,
Yeah.
down-regulate themselves.
Yeah, if their tendency is that, yeah.
Frustrated by not being able to actually practice it properly, so that comes what's for again and
Yeah.
again and again.
Totally. And it's our tradition emphasizes study first, study first, study first. You know, if you study enough, you really want to try this. But when you actually do, you're gonna avoid so many mistakes before you even start. You know, there are some strategies that say, just meditate, I won't even tell you how, just try, throw you in. And that can be really useful for some people who have maybe a natural confidence and a natural intuition towards introspection. Right? It can be really useful for those kind of folks. It suits a certain personality style really well and a certain learning style really well. But for some people, not having enough instruction means that they're just drowning, right? And they try and they fail and they get discouraged and they leave it. So it's really about enough self-awareness to know what's the best strategy for me. You know, the Buddha taught all of these strategies. They're not a difference in interpretation. It's not like the Buddha said this, and then this person decided it meant that, and that person decided it meant that, and that person decided it meant that. No, he taught all of those techniques, saying from the very beginning, people are different. Yeah? People are the same in that they want happiness and don't want suffering, but the way that looks and how they get it, it needs to be slightly individualized. Yeah, he said that right from the beginning. So it can be quite reassuring, right? And so the tricky thing is if you meet someone who's so discouraged, you know, how to re-encourage them, or if you yourself are the discouraged person, right? You yourself are the discouraged person. Don't do it until you feel like it. Go back to study. Go back to talking about it. Go back to thinking about it. Yeah, because all of those stages are transformative. It's not that only meditation is transformative. Yeah? I don't know, does that help? Yeah, yeah.
This chart, I'd like to ask or answer also. This chart is intended to us.
Mm-hmm.
We are a group of people who are already here.
Mm-hmm.
So you are influencing the choice. You are to convince us, we are convinced already.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are here, otherwise we won't be here.
Sure, okay.
What I want to add to it is, I think we have to remember that most of the people do not come here, do not think in the terms of meditate or not meditate, because most of us experience our life as destiny.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
don't really believe that we can influence our life.
Mm.
So, what I want to suggest is in this conversation, it is useful to remind to us who are sitting here and also the concept of suffering, because most people do not do anything unless they suffer.
Mm.
Even if they suffer, they don't usually do something because they accept their life as destiny.
Yeah,
So suffering is the main topic here.
sure, okay.
How difficult do you suffer?
Yeah.
To what extent does your suffering bother you? Are you ready to move your ass?
Mm-hmm.
This is the question, because all this chart is true, but you know, if I suffer and I started to do meditation and I felt that it gave me something, something very little, so probably there's good chance maybe that I will go on. And if I won't go on, I'll go back to suffering, so maybe it will bring me back.
Sure, yeah.
So,
What's your question? I mean, it's a true statement, I'm with you.
Suffering.
for a
you
change,
want
I
to
don't
be
have a
suffering.
question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, true statement. I toast you. Yeah. You know, I mean, we're talking to people who are already convinced. You're right. Yeah. We're talking to people who are already convinced, but people who are already convinced still don't necessarily do it, right?
No.
You know, so we're trying to get like ourselves motivated,
Because we don't
right?
suffer enough. That's what
Possibly, yeah. Or possibly we don't understand the causes of our suffering.
Convinced and
Yeah.
unconvinced.
Both?
I'm
Halfway.
saying it's you know, infinite
Yeah.
spectrum.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
I'm convinced.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's a, you know, it's a gradual building of depth, like all things. So, you know, if we're looking at this from the perspective of us who are somewhat convinced, enough so much that we would come to a course called How to Meditate, we're that amount convinced, right? And some of us have been meditating for 30 years, and some of us have been meditating for exactly as long as we've been here today. And all of us are at various levels of convinced or not convinced, and it has very little to do with the amount of years of trying, actually. It has to do with the way that we've been trying. Yeah, the way that we've been trying. So, you know, you have to have a certain level of confidence in your own ability to transform, right? To do meditation, you have to have a little bit of inner confidence that you are transformable, that your nature is good, right? That negative traits can be worked with and moved through. And that has nothing to do with religion, right? That has everything to do with just self-awareness and reflection, right?
And imagination.
And imagination, yeah, sure. And, you know, or at least an experimental quality that's willing to try. Yeah, let's see what happens, right? And, yeah.
How about, we are all the time talking about me or us. How about the thought that what I'm doing might have some implication on whatever is surrounding me, you know, and can get very far.
Yeah.
And it has to do with my suffering. I mean, that's the cycle,
Yeah.
because we are in a context of environment, of society, of humanity, whatever.
Yeah, and honestly, the main motivating factor for a lot of us is wanting to be of some use in the world, some positive impact in the world. Hopefully, you know, some people come because they're struggling and they want techniques to get through their struggling, but hopefully at some point it occurs to you, perhaps I could help, right? And that actually can be even more motivating than just your own stuff, right? Your own stuff can get you here initially, but the state of the world can keep you here and keep you coming back. Because we know that if a terribly angry person or a terribly sad person walked into the room this second and said nothing, but just sat down vibrating rage, we would all feel it. We would. So that means we're having an impact on each other right now in this second. And so if we change how we are in our being, that has an impact on the people around us immediately, experientially. And to the degree to which we've transformed, connecting to the degree to which they are receptive, benefit happens. And that's a happy thought, right? You're driving in traffic, everyone's stressed out, you're a little pocket of peace, you're helping traffic, you know? You're in the dinner party, everyone's fighting about politics, you're the one who's not fighting about politics or fighting with friendliness. You're helping, right? So, you know, so I think that a hugely motivating factor can be this bodhicitta attitude that says, for others, or not for myself alone. Not for myself alone. Myself, sure, but not myself alone. Yeah. You know, sometimes I think about the people in my life who I love very much, who are very close to me, who are suffering, and I don't know what to do for them. Those people, right? And I think if I had a deeper level of clarity and a deeper level of wisdom and practice, I would better know what to do. Or if nothing can be done, that would be clearer to me. So for them, I do this.
Maybe
Yeah.
they should go to the therapist.
Sure. It all helps, right? It all helps.
But they don't want to. They don't want to. They want to do it.
Right.
It's not about them.
Yeah. You know, it's like everything can work together, right? Like therapy only works given certain conditions and contexts. Buddhism only works given certain circumstances and contexts, right? Exercise only works, blah, blah, blah. Food, diet, all these things only work if conditions are right, you know? So we do what we can with what we've got so far and slowly build our skill set, right? So that we have more and more tools for peace, internally, externally. Yeah, and that it all works together. You know, I think it's helpful to have like a primary pivot point or a primary core belief system that everything else augments and supports and makes stronger. Sometimes we can become very distracted if we're trying to take a piece of wisdom from everywhere and then mush it all together and make something our own. Sometimes that approach can make us very messy and inefficient. But it doesn't mean that we can't use lots of different things, right? So say you have your main thing is the law, right? You're a lawyer, right? Say your main pivot point to frame reality is law, but then you use Buddhism and you use different kinds of thinking to make you a better lawyer in this world, right? Your core thing that you pivot around is the law, but these other things are now supporting your effectiveness within that space, yeah? You know, or, you know, say you're very, you know, traditional, you know, Christian, traditional Jew, traditional Muslim, but you like meditating, it can make you better at that, right? So whatever, you know, like whatever is your kind of core pivot point is fine. But I think also making sure that we don't just try and smush things together, because then we wind up just taking the parts that are comfortable, yeah? So, you know, growth involves a little bit of effort. Usually, right? So what comes from wanting to is doing, yeah? But it's the type of doing that's happy. Happy doing. Joyous effort, yeah? So there is effort, but it's happy effort. And what comes from happy effort is just happy without effort. So that's pliancy. Pliancy is the result of having put in a happy effort in something for a long amount of time, so much so that it becomes easy.
Pliancy is גמישות בעברית. סוג של גמישות נעימה.
Whatever Nisim said.
Believe me, huh?
But
I
also,
believe you. Yeah.
I think that if you have a
Shuki doesn't believe me.
very fixed agenda, like in the morning, just before you start your day,
Yeah,
it helps a lot. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Structured agenda, whether you feel like it or not, just do it, and it gets easier and better and deeper. Yeah, because some days you're more convinced than others, right? But if you're convinced enough to try, then at least momentum and continuity is built. Convinced enough to try with some ongoing effort. Okay, so practice makes perfect is the point of that portion. You know, we don't have pliancy in anything yet in a fully qualified form, but we have a version of it already with lots of things. For example, reading, right? At first, reading required a huge amount of effort when we were a little kid, yeah? We had to learn each letter separately, all sorts of repetition, right? And now words jump off of pages at us without effort. We don't have to sit and think about each letter. They come together naturally, they pop off the page. So we have like a type of pliancy with reading. And you say, oh, reading is effortless. Well, reading is effortless because of the effort you put in. That's why it's effortless, right? Meditation will be exactly the same. It will become effortless having put in effort. That's the way the mind works. The mind is trainable, right? Thank goodness the mind is trainable. So just kind of remind yourself of like worldly examples, right? You know, think of how many decisions you make while driving. Yeah, you make so many decisions while driving, but now they just come naturally, right? When you were a kid and learning how to drive, you had to think so hard, look in the mirror, look around, you know, there was this whole like real tension around it. And now, you know, on a not too bad Israeli traffic day, it's an effortless experience, right? The further you get into Tel Aviv, the more effort is necessary, but, you know.
You lose pliancy.
Yeah, exactly. You lose pliancy the more close to rush hour it gets, right? But, you know, so just reminding yourself that you have already done this with a number of things. Why should meditation be any different? Yeah. Okay, so you've sorted out your laziness, tick, right? No problem. Okay. This is in the course of a life or the course of one session, right? Just one meditation session. So it's not like you have to wait to be done with this to go to this. In one session, you know, you're moving through your laziness onto the next part, okay? The next part is forgetting what you're doing, right? So you want to do it, you're totally convinced, you're so happy about it, but you forgot how. Yeah, so the antidote is to remember how, right? Which is, so this particular type of mindfulness is remembering. Yeah, remembering the instruction or remembering the focal object. Yeah, which is why you need to contemplate and study a lot before you sit and meditate, because you might be so convinced but have no idea what to do. Yeah, which a lot of us land into that place a lot. So you forget the object, the antidote is to remember the object, or you forget the structure, the antidote is to remember the structure. Okay. Then what happens is you bounce between too tight and too loose, between sleepiness and agitation, between kind of a dull, hazy, or an excited, full of thoughts, right? This is what happens, right? You waver between the two. Some of us always go to laxity, some of us always go to excitement, some of us are bouncers, right? So again, this should be empowering information that you are not weird. You're not weird if this happens to you. This is like built right in assumption. This will happen, right? You will fall asleep and get bored, right? Or you will get into sort of meditated, but also like hazy, and it's just like a comfy relaxation, vague space of like, right? You know that one? Yeah, don't stay there. Okay, it's nice, but it's not meditating, right? Or the excited space that's like, that is a brilliant idea about compassion. I have a series of other thoughts about many things. Okay, yeah, you know, and that kind of madness that can happen, yeah, where you're like pinging around. Totally normal, right? So normal.
You're giving me this idea.
Huh? I'm gonna make it worse now, having named them, right? So the antidote to that is introspection, and the difference between these two is just a sharpening, yeah, a sharpening of focus. So mindfulness remembers the object, introspection keeps coming back to that thing you've remembered. Introspection.
זה להסתכל פנימה. להסתכל פנימה ולהפעיל מה שצריך להפעיל בעצם. להסתכל פנימה, introspection.
This.
Looking in, introspection, looking in, gone.
Yeah. So this is like the watcher. So you're meditating, but then there's the part of you watching yourself meditating. And that little guy watching you meditating is introspection, one of your many mental factors that are operating simultaneously. Introspection is going, oh, too tight, oh, too loose, and just gently making adjustments. Yeah? And, you know, so what happens is that once you're kind of on top of that, the next fault is non-application, which is you actually know that you've gotten too tight or too loose, but you don't care. Yeah? Yeah? So you're like, yeah, I'm getting a little dull, but it's nice. Yeah? Or I'm so excited about my ideas. I think I'm excited. I think I've lost my object of meditation. But my goodness, my mind is so entertaining. Yeah? So you know, but you've decided to do nothing about it. So the antidote is just apply the antidote, right? Catch yourself. Go back to the object. And then the next one is you're so used to applying antidotes, you're so used to catching yourself, that now you're doing it even when it's not necessary. Yeah, you're like, boop, 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 too tight, too loose, you know, and you're so used to, yeah, you're over adjusting that you've gotten yourself all worked up. So the antidote to that is just relax into equanimity, right? In the side note here is equanimity is of 3 types. This is only one of them. Yeah, because equanimity is used in many contexts in Buddhism, so don't think that it means the same thing in every context. There are 3 different kinds. We can talk about it later. But this is one, which is the antidote.
What type of equanimity is meant here?
This is the kind that is resting in balance. Yeah, in balance between not too tight, not too loose, not over-applying antidotes, is having a real steady focus that's not pushing or pulling. Yeah. It's equanimous, balanced. Okay, so these are the 5 faults and the 8 antidotes that will occur to you in one session, in one day, in one life, etc., etc. Questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you please again clarify the difference between mindfulness and introspection? Because for me, it's the same.
Yeah, this is remembering. Yeah, mindfulness is remembering in this context. Remembering the instruction or remembering the object, right? Introspection has already remembered, but it's keeping you and going back to it. Yeah, having remembered the object or having remembered the instruction.
Instruction is analytical and the object is...
No. But anyway,
It's okay.
yeah, but anyway, but yeah, I see where you're going. This is catching yourself and going back to what you've remembered. Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of a more specialized or sharper version.
When you're in laxity, you might not go into introspection because you're
Indeed. Yeah. So you know what to do with laxity is to engage introspection. Yeah. There are many ways, right? So many ways to get yourself out of laxity or to get yourself out of excitement, right? Laxity is got a tinge of not so happy. So what you do is you remind yourself of the benefits. You remind yourself why you're doing this. You remind yourself what's already happened having done this, and you get yourself happy. Yeah? That's one of the antidotes to laxity. Excitement is like too happy, right? It's not really too happy, but it's gotten so buzzy, you've got to pull it down. So remember death, okay? Yeah, right? So not too tight, not too loose, okay? And so basically, visualize it like, laxity is going down, excitement's going up, and you want to come to center, balance, equilibrium. So you just check, am I sinking or am I floating? Do I need to pull it down? Do I need to pull it up? Yeah, and you're just making gentle adjustments as you go. And that very process of adjusting is what's building strength and skill. So it's not a problem that these things happen. It's a problem if you allow them and you indulge them and you feed them and you stay there, right? But them happening is no big deal, right? It's normal to be expected. Yeah. Questions? Do you want to meditate? Mm-hmm. Let's meditate. Okay, so we're going to do one that's just starting with mindfulness of the breath, single-pointed attention on the breath, and slowly moving to clarity of the mind. So just take a minute and allow your body to really connect with the physical experience of sitting here. The body has no choice but to be in the present moment because it's physical. So use that very physicality to bring yourself present. And have the sense that your back is becoming very strong and straight, but not rigid. And the front of your body is becoming very soft and very receptive without becoming floppy. And then experiment with a very big motivation. Think to yourself something like, the purpose of my life is to free all living beings from suffering and to bring them perfect happiness. In order to do that, I must become enlightened. Therefore, I'm doing this small meditation to move in the right direction. And reword that if you need to. And allow the sound of the bell to slowly gather your focus further inward and onto the breath. And if it helps, you can imagine that your focus is like a surfer riding waves. Thoughts like waves come and go, and you just ride them, keeping your main focus on the breath. And one part of your mind noticing, am I too tight or too loose? Is it laxity or excitement? And just make a gentle adjustment and refocus on the breath. And slowly make there be less focus on the breath and more focus observing the thoughts. And you watch the thoughts without pushing or pulling, not following, not suppressing. Allow them to come and go naturally and just watch. And dedicating. Through the power of this focus, may we develop our potential to its utmost extent. And relaxing your attention. Okay, so now we'll turn to the dedication prayers in the prayer book. So right towards the back. So 2 pages from the back, there's a page that says brief dedication, dedication prayers, optional prayers of dedication, things like that. And we'll start with the optional prayers of dedication and then do the one on the following page, just those 2. All right, so if it's more comfortable, you can read it to yourself in Hebrew or in English, but we'll just do it very slowly in Tibetan. And then over the page, the short long life prayer for His Holiness in Tibetan, and then the prayer that spontaneously fulfills all wishes in English. Garia rawe goe jingam dia pendang dewa malu zhengwei ne genre ziwan tenzing getsoi shape zide abadu dengyuji. Savior of the Snowland Teachings and Transmigratory Beings, who extensively clarify the path that unifies emptiness and compassion, to the lotus in hand, Lord Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be fulfilled. Tenzin Kyung Belway Gonzo Duaboze. Joson Kawele Mondurub Pada Sodu De Gondu Shabten Sho.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Drive safely. See y'all later.